Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really great guest today. Her name is Alysia Lyons. She's a mom support coach. And as a mom, I really can't wait to talk more to her and dive in. So thank you so much for being here today, Alysia.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you share with our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you offer as a mom support coach?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm Alysia Lyons, and what I noticed in my own life is that the times that I've been the happiest as a mom was when I had a really strong support system. And I noticed that there's 5 things that really steal or increase our peace in our lives as moms. And so that is what I help moms do. First and foremost, around mom guilt, because let's face it, when they hand you that bundle of joy, they also hand you an 80-pound sack of mom guilt a lot of times. And I'm actually learning that for some people, it's from the moment of conception. And which is interesting to me because that wasn't my experience. Mine came a little bit later, but I do remember a Facebook post that I made. My son was maybe 3 weeks old, and I was like, man, mom guilt is real. And I don't even remember what it was about, but it was something.
Yeah, mom guilt is definitely a real thing. My first experience with it really came right after my daughter was born, like within a day or so, because I was not able to breastfeed. And, they were very much the hospital, everyone was pushing for that, and I wasn't producing enough milk. And my daughter was starving. I could tell she was starving. And I mean, and I think it was a year or two after that, I read an article about another mom who was kept being pushed to keep breastfeeding and her child died because she wasn't actually getting what she needed. And so I read that and I was just so relieved that I just remember I knew she was starving. My husband at the time, my ex-husband, called the nurse in the middle of the night because there's supposed to be a nurse hotline for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And called the nurse hotline in the middle of the night. I was running off of no sleep, 72 hours, no sleep. I was exhausted. And she wouldn't, I would feed her and she'd lay down and then she'd be screaming within 20 minutes. And it was just over and over again. And so he called the nurse hotline, was like, my wife is exhausted and our baby's not, she's not eating, or we don't know what's going on. We need help. And the nurse said, oh, we'll just have her hold her in the football hold and have the mom sleep. And I remember thinking, I'm going to smother her. I can't sleep and hold her like that. Like what? So I just remember I had gotten a sample in the mail for, I don't know, one of the formulas. When you're pregnant, they send you all the stuff. And so right. I had gotten, a few sample formulas. And at the time we were living separately. It's a whole thing. But I sent her dad to go to our other place to go get me that formula. And she literally, she ate it and she passed out for several hours. She was starving. The moment she had the formula, she was fine. But there was a lot of guilt that came with not being able to do it, not being able to provide that for her. And then hearing the doctors and the nurses still try to push me to keep trying. And after that experience, I'm like, no, she's eating. And that's, I don't want to go through that again, but there's a lot of guilt of well, maybe I should have tried harder, or maybe, you know what I mean? I should have done more. And that was my first experience of mom guilt, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps piling on.
Absolutely. And it's because we love those little boogers so much that we just want, I think that it's really starts when we have this idea of what our parenting journey is going to be like. And it's kind of like that old adage, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. But we don't really apply that to our parenting journey. We think that, okay, we're going to get pregnant when we want to. We're going to raise the baby. It's going to be, puppies and rainbows the entire time. And they're going to be amazing adults and we're not going to struggle. And maybe people don't have that thought consciously, but they have it subconsciously because it just turns into this, like you had an expectation. I'm a mom, mom's breastfeed. It's going to be easy peasy. And it wasn't. And what I want to highlight is that there's a part of you at the very minimum that was listening to your intuition to know that there's something not right with what's going on in this situation. And, you know, you could have ignored that and had these other consequences of the other mom that you mentioned, you know, and so I want to commend you for doing what was necessary and thinking outside of the box that you had created of what a good mom does. And you did something that a good mom does, which is listen to her intuition.
Thank you. Yeah, when I read that story a couple years later, my heart broke so hard for that mom. I just, that could have been me.
Yeah.
And especially because I'm not normally, especially back then. Now it's a completely different story, but back then I wasn't very good at doing my own thing. I definitely was trying to follow what I should do. I was a good follower. But I think it was just not the advice from the nurse was so ludicrous. Oh, just fall asleep with her and do the football hold. And I'm like, I want to smother her. Are you kidding me? Like, I know I'm half asleep and I know I'm a new mom, but I also know that that's was really dumb advice. And I think that was just enough for me to be like, you know what? We just need to get formula. And I think the fact that she just went right to sleep, it filled her up and she finally was at peace. That was also like, okay, I know that that was the right decision. If she had continued to wake up screaming, then okay, there's something else wrong, but it was obvious she was starving, and then she got what she needed and she was able to do what then she was able to rest, and then we were able to do the repeating and stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of that guilt was more so like, what's wrong with my body, like why didn't my body do what it was supposed to do? I mean, because my milk came in like 3 days late, which I think that's normal from what I understand. Like there's the colostrum or whatever at first, and then your milk comes in. And so of course, I was given like a pump, right? And so I remember it took me like 5 hours. I was just watching TV with her and I was just pumping nonstop, and I barely got like 4 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
That many hours of pumping.
Yeah.
And I gave it to her and she sucked it up and was still hungry. So I just kind of realized like, and because I gave her formula after that and she sucked that up too. So like obviously I just didn't have what she needed. And I think like there's a lot of guilt and like, what's wrong with me? Like, why couldn't I have done that? You know what I mean? But I am grateful that I was able to listen to something, to that other idea that was like, get the formula and go that route instead of trying to just hold out. Because I was also exhausted. I was like, I need to sleep.
Absolutely.
We both need to sleep.
And yeah, and I had a guest on my podcast recently who was talking about what it actually takes for our bodies to heal postpartum and what it actually takes nutritionally and otherwise to produce milk that we don't know about. Like my son's 12 years old and I didn't know about any of this stuff. I was like, I believe I was super lucky that, I was able to produce milk, and I've breastfed him for 6 months, and I stopped because I went on an antidepressant because I had postpartum depression. And so I had a little bit of guilt about that, but at the same time I knew that I was taking care of myself so that I could take care of him. And that was not a conscious thought, but there was something that let me know that I was doing the right thing. And later on, I was kind of glad because I know it would have been really hard to wean him off, where it was actually pretty easy at the 6 months. And but I can understand the guilt of like, hey, this is what my body's supposed to do, and it's not doing it. And I've heard other moms have guilt because she ended up having a C-section, or she ended up and another mom that had the epidural, and she wanted to be very natural, and she's like, man, I'm already failing as a mom because I couldn't withstand the pain. And it's like, it has nothing, like, I get, it's the ideals, it's what's out there of like, this is what a good mom does and this is what a good mom is. And if you're able to live up to it, my question is, are you happy living up to it? Because it's a lot to live up to. And I think it's more important that our kids have a mom that's happy than a mom that's living up to some ridiculous standard that's making her miserable.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Especially because we're never going to get it right according to society. It doesn't matter what we do, it's always going to be wrong to somebody.
Because there's conflicting stuff out there. There's literally people that are like, you need the epidural. No, you don't need the epidural. You need to breastfeed. No, that's, you shouldn't breastfeed. Like, there's literally conflicting information out there. There is no getting it right, using air quotes. Like, it's what's right is what feels right to you as mom and what's physically possible. Some things feel right, but it's not physically possible. And so we got to do a little Jedi mind tricking to get ourselves to release that guilt.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop. I mean, what we're talking about is the beginning of the mom guilt, because that's just the first time you feel it. Because once you, I have an almost 8-year-old, and man, the mom guilt, it's always there. I'm a single parent. Her dad passed away in 2019, so it's just me. And we also live in California, which is one of the most expensive states to live in. And so I have to work full time. I have to be a parent as much as I can full time. And I'm also trying to start my own business and really, do something. I'm working on getting to a place where I can give her give her more, but that takes time, especially when you have a business, to like getting to that spot where you're good. And now you can, take that extra time for you and your child. And so for me, I have a lot of guilt around working too much. And I know a lot of it is, well, I have to pay bills. I have to keep the roof over our head. I have to make sure that, like next week we're going to Universal Studios and I have to figure out how to pay for that. You know what I mean? For her birthday. So it's just the mom, and then discipline. And there's so many areas that mom guilt just loves to poke its ugly head out at us.
Which is why I wrote a book called The Good Mom Rules: Ditch Your Mom Guilt and Find Your Happy, because they're like, you've touched on several of the chapters, because like, especially being a single mom, trying to provide the life for your daughter that you want, that that she deserves. But there's things that have to be done, like you said, working full time. California's expensive. Like, there is a lot there. And there are moms that are working 3 jobs that get to kiss their kids goodnight for 15 minutes and that's all. But it's like, make those 15 minutes count. Make them count. That's what you've got. So make them count to the best of your ability, and take care of yourself to the best of your ability.
I think one of the hardest things that I still struggle with, but I'm trying to get there, is this idea of self-care first. Because I've noticed when I take a little extra time for myself, yeah, in the moment I have to fight that mom guilt for even doing that. But when I do it, I do show up better for her because I'm better. But it's really hard to fight that internal idea of like, you're being selfish. You're taking, you need to stop focusing on you. And it's so funny because I'm a tarot reader / spiritual channel. Like, that's my business. So I do a lot of readings, and it's so funny. The things that come up for people, I'm always like, oh man, that's for me too. And a lot of it is like, one of the analogies I use is when you fly in an airplane, they tell you if the oxygen mask has to come down and you have a dependent, you have to put it on yourself first, then you're dependent. And naturally, it's like a mom, we're like, oh, we got to get our kid taken care of. But like, if you pass out before you can get it on them, or let's say you get it on them and you pass out, either way, you're now useless to them. Right. So you have to be able to take, put on you and then them. And so I use that as an analogy when I share about self-care, but it's still hard to like remember, like, yeah, you're putting your oxygen mask on first, metaphorically, so that way you can go and show up to help them.
Yeah.
It's a really hard concept, but it's definitely, I've experienced it to be true when I'm able to get in that zone.
Yeah. No, I'm glad that you've experienced that, because that's been my experience too, that, when I'm doing things that take care of me and essentially fill my cup, that's the analogy that I use, that, you fill your cup. And if you continue to fill your cup, then you give from the overflow. So you're never below the 100%. You're giving from the extra. And it's that when you're depleted, it's that you end up giving emptiness, and emptiness shows up like snapping at our kids and not being as patient as we could be. And I saw that breath, like, just that's what it shows up as. And so then we feel guilty about doing those things also, where if we took 15 minutes to do something for ourselves, and it can be as short as 15 minutes, it could be as short as 5 minutes, where you just sit and breathe. And one thing that I teach is breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. We don't breathe deeply enough in our society. We're very shallow breathers as we're running around doing all the things. So just doing something as simple as breathing can be helpful. And so I just recently kind of got into tarot and oracle cards. And by get into it, I mean I have bought 9 decks in the last, like, this month. Um, slightly on the obsessed side, but I'm sure you understand.
Breathe.
Someone told me that when you pull a card for someone, that it's usually for you too. It's for the puller as well as the sitter, or the reader as well as the sitter. And which I think is awesome, because that is, for you, could be a way that's filling your cup. We make it very complicated of what we think self-care is. And it's really anything that gives you energy. It's really anything that gives you joy. So I actually made it so that when I do laundry and dishes, that actually brings me joy, because my husband's love language is acts of service. And so I'm doing something that he doesn't enjoy. And by doing those things, I'm loving him. And so that actually gives me, and it makes me happy when the house is clean.
Yeah, that's so funny. The 9 decks in a month. You know what? That is totally normal in the tarot world. A lot of readers have several. I am unique in this instance, though. I only have 3, which is very minimal for a professional reader. So I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll suddenly find that obsession. But right now it's more like I got the cards that talk to me, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
I have 2 different cards that I use, and one I like to call my shadow deck, because it just feels like it gets a little more in there and wants to really dig down deep, and the other one does too, but the other one is just more vibrant, and I like to use that at events, because I see a lot of people who've never seen a tarot deck before, so that one is less scary. But yeah, self-care is very, it's an abstract idea that it makes sense logically, but unless you know exactly what that plugs into for yourself, it can seem like this thing you can never catch. It seems very evasive. Like, how do you get a thing called self-care? But I mean, it could be coloring. It could be, singing to the radio on the way to work, like you're saying, do dishes if it makes you happy. Like for me, like if I were to do dishes or laundry, I'll throw my music on, and it's like a chance I could just jam out to my music. So there's definitely, it's exactly what you're saying. I totally agree with that. It's harnessing your joy, and it's harnessing whatever nourishes you, whatever makes you feel good, really.
It's caring for yourself. That's what self-care is. And we care for the things that we love. And so when you're taking care of yourself, you're just loving yourself. And I don't think there's anything selfish about loving yourself.
Yeah, I think society has gotten that one way off. This idea of, you have to put everyone else first and you have to go on the back burner. Like, no, are you crazy? How are we supposed to function? But maybe that was the point.
I mean, I got some theories, but
So I would love to hear though, how did you become a mom support coach? Like what was your backstory that led you into this work? I love backstories because it's usually when you can see how doorways open and things just fall into place. So I'd love to hear how you got into this work.
Yeah, I took the long way. I took the path less traveled, although there's probably lots of people out there that are taking the long way. But I started a direct sales business and I had my son, and 19 days later I became a leader in this company. So I was in the top 2%. I earned a free car the month after that. And then within a year of those things, my son's dad and I split. And because I fell into what I call the pit of despair. For any of you, what is that? Princess Bride fans. I was in the pit of despair. And I was really struggling to at literally everything that I was proud of at that point was stripped away. So I was proud of being a wife and a military wife and a leader in this company and a car and driving a free car and being a good mom, and so one by one lost the husband, lost the military wife status, had to turn in the car and had to step down as this leader. And then my son was showing signs of autism, although that's not what I didn't know that that's what it was. And so I'm just sitting here thinking, what is wrong with this kid that I have to leave when we have to leave the park, that he's having complete meltdowns. And I'm yelling at my kid because he doesn't want to leave at the park. So it's like I'm feeling like a terrible mom. Not to mention, I didn't ever want to be a single mom, but I started to feel a little better. And but I wanted to get back into this leadership role in the direct sales business. And I found a life coach that catered and helped specifically in that company. And I went through this year-long program of his. Halfway through the program, it might have been 6 months, but halfway through the program, he said something about a free coaching call. And I was like, oh, if it's for free, it's for me. And so I signed up for this free coaching call. And I probably just word vomited all this emotion that I had been holding up. And I've since talked to her, and she said, I feel like I saved your life that day. And I said, I don't know if you saved my life, but I do know that you changed my life that day, because I signed up for coaching. And about 6 months into that coaching, I was like, I want to do this. Although that was the first and the last time that I admit that I wanted to be a coach for many, many years. I was like, no, I want to, will this help me in my business, in my direct sales business? If it'll help me in my direct sales business, then sign me up. And like I said, I took the long way around. But I went to this week-long program 3 times. And the third time, I've actually been 9 times. I'm not a slow learner. It's like it's a personal development course inside this 5 days. And I heal more in those 5 days personally than I had in years and years of therapy. But right before this third time that I went, I had an incident at the pediatrician's office where I got really triggered. I didn't really realize the word at that point, but that's basically what happened. I got triggered and I walked out. And I'd been in coaching long enough that I was like, that's not how I normally react to things. So I might be feeling guilty about something. And I texted my coach to keep myself accountable, because I know how my brain works. And it's like, oh, you noticed something? We're going to make you forget it now. And so they do this coaching tool called Eliminating Guilt and Shame. And they demonstrate on the people in the room. And so everybody raised their hand. Who's got guilt? Everybody but me raised their hand. And I was like second to the last person at the end of the room to go. And as they were going around the room, they said, who's got guilt? And I was like, oh, that's right, I did have something. And I raised my hand at the last second and I said, I let someone hurt my son. And the person doing the demo was my coach. And so I watched her like almost fall over at the power of the words. And I knew I needed to say it that way in order to connect to the emotion, because I'm really good at not connecting to my emotions, or especially at that point. Within 30 minutes, she helped me release this guilt. Basically, what had happened was I left my son with a babysitter that was inappropriate with him. And I did all the things that you might do if that happened. I filed a police report. I called Child Protective Services, because in my worldview, a little girl doesn't do that to a little boy unless it's being done to her. And nothing went anywhere because the family lied about it. And so there was no evidence, and my son was 4, so it was really hard to get and he didn't want to talk about it, so it was really hard to get any information about it. So that went nowhere, and I think that's when the guilt set in. But I just kind of buried it because I didn't know what to do about it. And so I actually became this crazy, like, overprotective mom, where if you did anything that I thought was not what I would do or that I felt was wrong, you are now cut off and you don't get to be around my kid. And the thing that triggered me in the doctor's office is that I mentioned it and they wanted to file another police report, and it had already not gone anywhere. And so that pissed me off, quite frankly, and I left. When I left that conference, I started interviewing moms to kind of, because I still didn't know what my niche was. I knew that I wanted to work with moms. I have a really soft spot for them. And when I started interviewing moms, I started seeing mom guilt everywhere. And because I had zero confidence in my coaching skills at the time, I wrote a book, because even though I hadn't written anything in probably 12 years at that point, I still had more confidence in my writing skills than I did in my speaking skills at that point. But as I was looking for ways that I could really genuinely help and connect with moms, that's when I recognized that there's these 5 things that either increase or steal our peace. Those are the people in our life, our emotions, our assets, like the physical surroundings, our chaos, and our exhaustion. That's when I created my peace assessment. So I'll walk you through, like, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10 in those areas, and how can we get you from, if you're a 5 right now, how can we get you to a 6?
That's a beautiful story. I mean, we all get there at different times, right? I think the blessing is that you woke up enough to find it, because there's still a lot of people who have no idea that they're supposed to be doing more with their life. So it doesn't matter how long, right? Just as long as you get there and you're able to tap into your gifts. I have to.
It's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
I have to ask, was it Mary Kay?
Yes.
I know, because I was also a Mary Kay consultant. So
Yeah.
everything you're saying, it's free, it's for me. It's hard. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Mary Kay. And it's really hard to get out of that world when you're in it. I never made it to the car. I got on Target for a car, which was exciting enough, but yeah, that's just beautiful that you were able to kind of, you needed it probably, because that's one of the things I love about backstories is you get to see why certain aspects had to be there, right? It was a stepping stone to get you to the next level, get you to the next level, get you to the next level. And I mean, even for me, Mary Kay, it taught me how to at least do the bare basics of running a business. So I took a lot of those tools for my own business. And so if I didn't have those skills, I would not be able to at least start where I did. But it's beautiful that you're able to kind of take your journey and start seeing your own themes that were coming up for you. And then finally being able to realize, like, wait a second, there's a reason this theme is coming up for me over and over. It's just so fascinating when you find it, you're just like, it's the thing that you want to do all the time. It's the thing you want to talk about all the time. And then when you're able to see the difference it makes when you do, put effort into it and everything. So how long have you been having your support coach business for?
So I think that I started calling myself mom support coach in 2021. That was really, I wrote the book and published the book in 2020, but what I realized is that every mom needs some support, and it can be difficult because moms put themselves last, and it breaks my heart because I know how much this coaching has helped my life and how it's changed my parenting. And like, what I've noticed is that the better person that I became, the better parent that I became. And really, it's not about, that I was a bad person before, but I had these protective layers. And one thing that is universal is if we're not parented in a way that felt good to us, there's some healing that needs to happen. And it all gets triggered when we become a parent, because it's like we have these files that are locked away until we open this role of, I'm a parent now. And then all these files get unlocked of like, this is what parents do. Depending on how conscious you are as a person, you might be repeating old patterns. And one of my favorite phrases that I heard recently is that it ran in my family until it ran into me. Like, that hits me to my core because I see some of the patterns in my family, and I see how it hit me, and I've noticed it, and I've worked on releasing it. One thing is, public criticism. We do not do well with being criticized in front of people. That is definitely one of our patterns. And I've seen how it has made members of my family just fall apart. And I've seen where it's diverted me in my path. Like, I was going to be a teacher until they told me that you get critiqued about you have to turn in your lesson plan. Is like, oh, really? No. Here's what's not going to happen. And I was a sign language interpreter for about a year or two. And I had one of my pupils tell me that I wasn't good enough for the college level. And I never signed again. So, and I wrote a book in 2008, and the lack of sales, I'll put air quotes, was feedback to me that I had failed and I'm not good at this. When really, I just don't have any clue what it takes to be a successful author, like how much work it actually takes to do it. But that felt like public criticism.
Oh my gosh, you just mentioned so many things that I want to touch on. Oh my gosh, I love, love, love that saying that you just said of, it ran in my family until it ran into me. And I can relate so much to that. It's basically, you're choosing to be a cycle breaker. Before you choose to be a cycle breaker, you have to realize you're in a cycle. Oh man, talking about mom guilt. About 2 years ago, 2.5, maybe 3 years ago now, my daughter had the worst tantrums in the world. And my sister, when she was younger, she's about 6 years younger than me, she had similar tantrums. And I mean, and our family didn't know how to deal with it. We'd record her to show my dad, and which was not, my dad was an abusive alcoholic. So that wasn't helpful. He wasn't going to help us at all. And, my mom, I guess, did try to get her into therapy, and my dad was very anti-therapy. So that didn't go anywhere. But for me, watching my daughter act just like my sister, that was a huge trigger because, one, I felt like my sister got away with everything back then, for starters. And then also she would get physical, and my daughter was getting physical in these tantrums. She would throw things, she would pound on the walls, she'd scream at the top of her lungs, she'd break things. And I was scared. And as a single parent, because it was just me at the time, I didn't know how to handle her. And so there's a lot of guilt there. Like, should I yell at her? Should I do more than I'm doing? But then the yelling or the spanking didn't feel good either. So I'm like, that doesn't feel, plus it didn't do anything. She just looked at me like, what? That's all you got? So it was like, okay, either way, it's not working. But it didn't feel right to me. I'm like, this doesn't feel good. I don't like the yelling. I don't want to try the spanking, but I'm really tired of her hurting me, because she'd also follow me around and pinch me and hit me and scream me. And I would try to calmly, I did the gentle parenting thing first, and that didn't work. I was trying to calmly tell her, you're going to hurt mommy, and try to redirect. And it wasn't what she needed at that moment. And I was still getting hurt. And it got to the point where I would remove myself and lock myself in my room and just tell her, okay, when you calm down, I will come out. But you can't hurt mommy anymore. And then she'd pound and scream on the door, and then I'd feel terrible. But I didn't know what else to do because she wouldn't stop. And so finally, I got her into therapy. I did what my parents didn't do with my sister, and found out that she has ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, which thankfully they outgrow that if you're able to nip it in the bud pretty early on.
Yeah.
And she has ADHD as well. So I think that I look at my sister and I think, wow, she really got the short end of the stick, because they didn't know how to deal with her. I think it was the same thing, the ODD plus the ADHD, and then not getting support. Whereas with my daughter, I was able to go, okay, no, this isn't working. And so I remember her therapist said, okay, so kids with ODD, they need structure. They need a structure system, and they need rewards, and they need discipline. Like, you need to have both on either side. And I created this coin system where she earned coins based on doing what I asked her to do, what I needed her to do. And then she'd lose coins if she, did any of the behaviors that I didn't obviously want. And it worked. I mean, like, it was so crazy, the turnaround. She just needed that structure and the boundaries, and they needed to be firm. And I didn't know how to implement that beforehand. Now she very rarely acts out. When she does, it's like, sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like, oh, this is nothing. She's just being a kid. And we're going to talk about it later. But she's even better now at talking about how she feels about things, which is huge. Like, she'll catch herself and be like, I'm sorry, I'm feeling really mad, or I'm feeling really this. And, but it took a lot of looking back at my own triggers to get there, because I had so many coming up during that whole thing where I was putting my own parenting through a fine-tooth comb and realizing that I wanted to do things different than what my parents did. And, granted, they were doing the best they could based on their own parenting background. You know what I mean? We all are doing the best we can, but I think I made that conscious choice. And again, the mom guilt doesn't stop, but I do feel like some of that is once you're conscious and you're aware of, because there are triggers in me where, I'm gentler on her than my parents were on me. And the little kid in me is like, why is she getting away with that? We wouldn't have gotten away with that. And I have to kind of like talk to myself and be like, yeah, but we didn't have the same kind of support back then. It's okay. Because when I do snap, it doesn't feel good either. So it's like, I'd really prefer that open communication where we talk about it versus the punishment, just the punishment and the shame. I'm really very against the shame-based stuff.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job. And what I would offer to you is, when your inner child is like, hey, that's not how we were parented, is take the time and you said you talk to yourself, well, talk to her and give her what she needed in that moment. And if you're not sure, just ask her, what do you need right now? What would make you feel? How can I support you the way that our parents didn't support you? What can I give you that you weren't given back then? And you'll notice that she'll quiet down a little bit in a calm way, like in a satiated way, not in a repressed kind of way. And it sounds, this concept of inner child work, I was like, what inner child? What are you talking about? But like, there's a 4-year-old little girl inside me that a lot of times didn't get what she needed. And she shows up every now and then. And when she shows up, then we got to give her what she needs.
I love that. I've definitely connected with my inner child, but I don't do it as often as I should. And more often than not, when she comes up in the way I just brought up, I don't necessarily go all the way to that point. So that's a really good idea. And I know a lot of it is our perception stops at what, 7, something like that. And so a lot of times we're operating from this very young state without even realizing that, our biases are from way back then.
I
Yeah.
learned that I literally learn this lesson almost on a daily basis when I acknowledge myself. Like I got a root canal yesterday and he messed it up. I don't know how you mess up a root canal, but he messed it up and I'm still in a lot of pain because he messed it up. And I get to live in this pain for the next 7 days because I don't know what kind of OCD he has, but he only works on tooth 29 on Wednesdays. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I was, really irritated this morning. And my friend who we trade coaching back and forth, she said, what kind of support do you need from me? And I said, honestly, I feel so pissed off. Like I am pissed off that this is happening. And I sent her that text and I was like, now that I've acknowledged that I'm pissed off, I actually feel better. And it was just the acknowledgement of how I was feeling, because I also know that, anger comes from feeling disempowered. And so that was another thought that went through my head is like, oh, I just feel, I don't feel like I have any power right now. I feel like I'm at the mercy of this dentist that has this stupid rule. And I just get to live in this moment. Just get to live with this pain that he didn't tell me that I would be experiencing, by the way. And then, then you start to spiral a little bit because I was questioning whether I should do the root canal to begin with, because I know that they're actually not very healthy for you. And I didn't want to, but I'm like, I don't want to pull another tooth. I don't want to pull a tooth, and have to either have a hole or do the implant thing again. And yeah, so there's this spiral that happens that you got to catch it sometimes before it goes too crazy. But just all of the acknowledging of that, like I feel better. I don't feel as angry as I did this morning, and I was really angry.
Yeah, acknowledgement is super important in anything. It's one of the cards in my tarot deck is the Justice card. And the way that I read that one is it usually speaks to some kind of injustice, some kind of unfairness where you're like angry and upset and feel like there's something that should be done. And why did this happen to me? This isn't fair. And the whole message and invitation around the justice is acceptance. It is what it is. It's not okay that it happened. There's no condoning it, but you can't do anything from this space of stewing in it. It's not helpful. It's not helping you. And so the sooner you can accept it and understand that it is what it is, the sooner you can start figuring out, okay, now what I'm going to do about it. Now what's the next step? But boy, it's easier said than done. When you're in that feeling, it is so triggering. It's so hard to just be like, it is what it is. I'll just deal with the pain. Like, no, of course not. You have to go to a place of acceptance. And to get there, there's a little bit of a journey, right? So, depending on how big the injustice is. So yeah, that acknowledgement piece though, it just letting yourself own it. Like, I'm mad. This is not okay. Is a good place to start with acceptance for sure.
And that's the one thing that I recognize that I don't say very often, that I'm angry, because women are allowed to feel every emotion except for anger. Men are only allowed to feel anger, when actually we all feel all the emotions.
Yeah.
Somebody made that decisions at some point that women have to be sugar and spice and everything nice, and anger doesn't fall into that. Or there's an energy that's, the divine feminine is more nurturing, and at some point somewhere we've been hurt by someone else's anger, and so we don't want to hurt people with our anger. And at least that I can own that for myself, that I don't want to hurt people with my anger. And so then it becomes like, well, I don't even want to acknowledge that I feel angry. Humans are fun.
Yeah. That's one of the things, women are, we can't be too emotional, because if we feel too much, we're too emotional. If we're angry, then we're out of control. It's ridiculous. I'm not a fan of the patriarchy. Things got to change. Women are not, we're so strong, and we've been told that we're not. So it's blah, yeah, so much unpacking. But anger is actually, from what I understand, and I'm coming from a hypocritical place right now because I have a hard time with anger too. Probably the only person who sees my anger is my daughter, and and then that's where I really try and curb it, because for some reason it's a lot easier for me to show it to her than it is anyone else. I tiptoe, right? And and then she's the one that kind of gets the backlash. And so that's another part of my unpacking and my triggering is, mommy shouldn't have yelled. You don't deserve to be yelled at. And we'll sit and talk about it, and I apologize and repair. But the rest of the world would probably never know that that happens, because I do tend to tiptoe with my anger, because I don't, it's a combination of exactly what you said. It's like, I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to be offensive. I don't want to come off as too much or too oversensitive or over this, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's not okay, because anger is really there to protect us. That's the whole purpose. It's there is to let us know, like, hey, this isn't okay. I'm not okay with this. That's why it's there. And if you're able to express it, then you don't have that toxicity of overdoing it, or where you feel like you have to like repress them, it blows up. If you just express it when it comes up in a healthy manner, it's a very healthy emotion, but a lot of us are not in touch with it. So what is a struggle that you see a lot of moms? I know mom guilt is kind of like the big one, but is there any other struggle or something maybe specific in the mom guilt that you see a lot with moms, and what advice would you give for that thing?
Yeah, I would say that I've really only experienced 3 moms in, what year are we in, 2024? In the last 3 years, say I don't have any mom guilt, and I haven't pushed, but I've, like, in my head, I'm like, just wait, or I could dig and find some, but I'm at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to create stuff for people. I think that the biggest thing that we need to remember is to feel compassion for ourselves. I had a client ask the other day about forgiving themselves. Like, is there a tool to help with forgiving yourself? And I said, well, the reality is that forgiveness is only necessary if we did something wrong. And when you take a higher perspective that everything happens the way that it's supposed to, because there's a divine purpose, then there is no need for forgiveness, because nothing wrong happened. And that's a really hard pill for people to swallow. But it's like what you said earlier with my story. All of the things that I went through in my story, all of the 13 years that I've been in Mary Kay, like, it's prepared me for where I'm at now. Was every minute of that journey enjoyable? Absolutely not. Was any of it a mistake? No, because I learned stuff from it. And I'm not saying, like, okay, so everybody just do whatever you want and yell at your kids all you want and don't worry about it. You said a very important thing earlier, is repair. Like, if you're aware that you did something wrong, you can repair the damage. The beautiful thing about that is they start emulating the behavior. I also heard you say that your 7-year-old, almost 8-year-old, right? That she comes back to you and says, Mom, I'm sorry, I was feeling really angry. My son does the same thing. And when he's 12, and so he's got some hormones going on, he's very aware of the fact that there's hormones surging through his body. And he's like, sorry, I'm really sorry, I gave you an attitude, Mom. I'm just really frustrated, or hormones, or whatever it is. Like, he tells me what's going on, and then because he understands himself, then I can understand him better also. So that, to circle back to answering your question, is having that compassion for yourself, to understand that I believe our children choose us. And they choose us because of the lessons that we're going to teach them. They're going to learn lessons through our mistakes, as well as the lessons they're going to learn from the things that we do intentionally. and their soul has a purpose that needs the lessons that they're learning from you. You know, I love my dad dearly. And my dad, the way that my dad was raised and the way that he raised me, I learned lessons through that where I had to look for love from other people instead of giving love to myself. And I eventually learned that lesson. And it's a beautiful lesson. And it was a painful one while I was learning it. But I can appreciate who my dad was and not love every single thing that my dad did.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Compassion is you can, so what is that saying? You can only show compassion for others where you show it with yourself. Like you can't really show compassion to any real extent if you're not giving it to yourself. It's not like real, it's not genuine, right? Because you're so judging on yourself. It's hard to really come at someone and it's actually, I think it's, you can't love others until you love yourself. So you can't truly, but it's the same idea with compassion, right? If you're not able to have compassion for yourself, do you really have compassion for others? Because you're totally not, you know what I mean? But I really do agree with that. The whole, our kids pick us and we pick our parents, and it's a hard pill to swallow though, especially when you have like abuse and you're and being raised. And so like I struggle a lot with that idea with my dad, but I know that I have learned a lot from him, all the things I don't want to do or be as a parent, but it's still, I did learn from him from that. And I do think that there are soul contracts, like they came here to learn what they needed to learn, but that their learning happens to coincide with yours, and not always, it doesn't always show up in the nicest way, but it's a way of learning and growing together. It's not saying, because people hear that and like, oh, so should we still keep these people in our lives? No, like if they're not good for you, no. You know what I mean? But you can have compassion for where they're coming from and even thank them, and not thank them for what they did to you, but have gratitude for what you learned for it, and that's a hard pill to swallow too. I know there's a whole movement right now. I've seen it a few times on Facebook where people are like, it's like you take the idea of, I took what people gave me and I grew something out of it. Like I took the crap, use it as fertilizer, and I grew something out of it, right? And then there's a bunch of people that are like, no, maybe it was just crap, and we just had to, we had to survive. And it's like, yeah, but I see you, and I understand that you're not ready to acknowledge that there could be something more here, and I feel for that. But I think that honestly, being able to see it as something that you can build upon is such a beautiful way to look at it, because it puts you back in the driver's seat.
Right.
When you're in that position of, it was just a bunch of crap that was handed to you, and you didn't deserve it. Of course you didn't deserve it. No, of course not. It's not like that's not what that point is about. But it is saying that since you were given it, if you just choose to stew in it and feel sorry for yourself, it's not going to help you get anywhere.
Because if you don't take the crap and turn it into fertilizer, you're just carrying around the crap. Then at least now you're assigning the crap a purpose. You're turning it to fertilizer. Like it just. I mean, to me that it's a more beautiful way of looking at it. And I've said for a while, like, it's not your fault what happened to you, but it's your responsibility to do something with it. So you can repeat the pattern, or you can let the pattern die with you so that you can pass along the lessons that you learned from that pattern.
Right.
And change somebody else's life, even if that life is your own or your child or a neighbor. Like you don't have to necessarily like be a coach or anything along those lines, but you can change somebody else's life just by giving them a different perspective.
One of my favorite little memes is this thing that says how you can light up the world. And it's just by your own light. And then it just shows a group of people around you, and those that are around you get touched by your light, and they light up, and they light up. And so you don't even have to, like you say, you don't have to be in the service work to make a difference. You can just do your own. The more you heal, the more you find yourself, the more you find your happiness and your joy, people notice. Mm-hmm. And the more you exuberate that, the more people are going to be like, wow, what's she doing? It doesn't take much, it's just the seed you're planting. Oh my gosh. So I was going to say this earlier, but it just totally came to me in a completely different way. So you basically were able to take the crap, you grew a flower out of it, and instead of passing on more crap, you're passing on seeds.
Mhm.
So
That's beautiful. That's awesome.
in the wind, and now those seeds are being planted, and it's something beautiful, something truly beautiful, and not something that has to be turned beautiful. So from here, I would love to shift over to something that I call synchronicity story time. It's one of my favorite segments just because I love stories of synchronicity. I love stories of like the universe winking at us and letting us know we're not alone in the breadcrumbs and everything else. Do you have any synchronistic stories you could share, or positive paranormal stories that you can't explain, but it's like your way of knowing that, yeah, there's something else out there?
Yes. It's so my best friend passed away 5 years ago, and she passed away on April 4th. And on the 4-year anniversary of her passing away on April 4th, I woke up at 4:44 in the morning. And when I got into the car later on and I turned on the ignition, the song that was playing was Halo by Beyonce. And so I was like, okay, so Shelly, her name, like Shelly's here, because like it wasn't lost on me that on 4/4, the 4-year anniversary, I woke up at 4:44. I'm turning on this Halo song. Beyonce's on the radio. That's Beyonce, and she's known as Queen Bee. And if you're not familiar in the Mary Kay world, the bee is the symbol for in the Mary Kay world, that bees are not supposed to be able to fly because their bodies are too big for their wings. But the bee doesn't know that, and so it flies anyway. And if it wasn't for Mary Kay, I wouldn't have known Shelly. So no matter what, any of the painful, ups and downs that I had inside the business, it has nothing to do with the business itself. It's like ups and downs of life. But without that business, I wouldn't have known her. And had I not known her, my son and I would have a different relationship, I'm for sure. And one of my 9 decks that I bought the other day I was drawn to it because there was a bee on the front. And when I picked it up and flipped it over, there was an owl on the back. And the day she passed, I looked into her bedroom and there was a stuffed animal owl that to her represented her dad. So when her dad passed, I never got that story because I didn't believe in that at the time. But I remember looking into her bedroom and seeing that owl, and I said, that's mine. I'm giving that to my son, because it was a Scentsy plushie thing, and I had the lion one. So my son has Mommy Lion, Shelly Owl, and Xander Cat. So he wasn't really a stuffed animal person for a long time, but he has those 3 stuffed animals at the very least. Yesterday I was driving around and I was feeling still kind of down about the whole tooth situation. And I pulled into this parking lot and I looked to the right, and there was a spray painted owl on the wall. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are the odds of this spray painted owl? And so I took a picture of it, and then I looked again, and right next to the owl, there was a bee spray painted. And I was like, okay, Shelly, I see that you're here. And these kinds of synchronistic things that have started happening that I've been paying attention to is why I started writing a book yesterday called Is It God or Is It Google? Conversations with the Universe. I was getting my nails done, and my nail lady was like, oh my gosh, I just switched over to mushroom coffee. And I was like, really? Mushroom coffee? That's interesting. And I think she told me the name of the company was Rise, RYSE. And I was like, yeah, I'll have to look into that. Promptly forgot, left, and within 2 hours, I had an email from Rise for 10% off. We're all used to seeing that happen, where you mention something and then on Facebook it pops up. I've never gotten an email because of like, where'd they get my email from? I texted her. I was like, did you sign me up for something? She's like, no, I don't even have your email. And so a couple months later, I was telling my friend, I was like, yeah, God wanted me to have this or the universe wanted me to have this coffee, right? I said, well, it was either God or it was Google. And everybody just started laughing. Like, but it's those little synchronicity things. Like those things happen to me constantly. My friend does this thing called soul mapping, and it's her thing to teach. When she taught me, I was explaining it to my brother, and he was like, "Oh, so it's kind of like that movie Serendipity." And I was like, "Kinda, but it feels more like A Beautiful Mind, where you're seeing all the things and you're trying to tie everything together and connect it all." But that's what these conversations with the universe are, is seeing these little God winks. They just, and a lot of people go to Google to figure out what, angel numbers are, or what it means to, like, what does it mean when you see a butterfly all the time? Or what does it mean when you see an owl? What is the symbolism of this? You go to Google, right? So that's why, that was another reason it was like, is it God or is it Google?
I love that. When you write that book, you need to come back on as a guest and talk about that book and share it so I can read it. And I love that you're saying is it God or is it Google? Because like you said, we've all experienced that where we happen to talk about something or hear something and all of a sudden it's showing up in our ads. And before I segue from there, because I have my own story I want to share based on what you shared. But I love that story with your friend. It really sounds like she is like your cheerleader. She's following you and letting you know that you're not alone and you're on the right path, even though you're not doing what you both were doing together. But I think she sees you and she's acknowledging the work you're doing now and that you're in alignment. It really sounds like that. So that's so beautiful. So I have a small synchronicity story that happened yesterday I'd love to share because it kind of goes along the is it Google or is it God point. So the lady that I had on yesterday, who I interviewed with, she is a crystal healer, teacher, energy healer. She's basically her whole life, she's been able to see beyond the veil, like angels and dragons and fairies and things that are obviously not normal, right? And she said that she always just kept it to herself. And then realized when she got older that no one else saw these things, or not many people saw these things. And so it's so funny because, like, for me, I'm totally bought and sold with the spiritual realm, with guides and angels and higher power, and we're all connected and synchronicities. I have a harder time with the mythical side of things, like with the fairies and the dragons and everything else. But it was so funny when we were talking about just different things outside of the recording. We were just chatting, and I did have some interesting experiences when I was younger, kind of around that fairy magical realm. And I remembered after I got off the phone with her, I remembered when I was very little, like back when I was still very in my childlike mind, before I stuffed it and pretended like it didn't exist. I was very imaginative and like I felt like I could go anywhere and turn it into a magical fairy garden. Maybe not really fairies, but it would have that. I would just pick up the magic in the air and turn like the small stone fence into like a secret door, or like all these things. And I was just kind of reminiscing about that feeling. Like I miss that feeling of magic that I used to just carry with me because I was so imaginative. And I thought, okay, so if fairies are real, universe, talk to me. Okay, I want to be real direct here. If I need to if I should look more into fairies and start believing that maybe there's another realm where they exist and we just can't see them, whatever. I need a sign, and I needed to be super direct. So one of the things she showed me was this thing called a fairy door, which is it's like a really pretty decorated door against like a stone, whatever. And you can buy them at different places, but it's the whole point, or like a little fairy house, something to invite them into your home, right? Well, she showed it to me, and so I do when I'm not doing my business and I'm not podcasting, my day job is DoorDash. So I do a lot of food delivery. I'm driving around a lot. And so I just said, universe, I want to see a fairy door. Like, you need to show me a fairy house, fairy door, something very obviously related to fairy door or fairy houses. And so I'm thinking, is it going to be in front of someone's house? But I literally made that decision. I'm like, I'm going to find one because I believe, right? Like, I believe it's going to happen, make it happen. And I even like made a point to be like, and it can't be on my phone. I literally was like, it can't be on my phone because me and that girl talked about fairies. So I know how Google works. I know how AI works. It cannot be on my phone. And so the first house I delivered to, it didn't have a fairy door, but it was very like, it had a really pretty garden. It kind of felt whimsical. And I was like, oh, that's pretty. I could see a fairy door here, but there's no fairy door, so I'm not going to count it. It was just like something I acknowledged. I'm like, this is really cool. Well, after one of my deliveries, I took a turn I wasn't planning on making. And like halfway through this turn, I'm like, why did I go this way? And then I remembered that I wanted to go to Dollar Tree because yesterday was my mom's birthday. So I wanted to go grab her a card. And I thought, oh, I'll just stop at Dollar Tree since I'm heading that direction. And as I park in the parking lot, I heard clear as day, this is where you're going to find your fairy house. I was like, okay, that was weird. So I went inside and I'm meandering looking at the cards, and I see the spring section and there's like children's painting art. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll pick up something for my daughter. And so I'm looking at some of the art, and I just happened to look down. 2 shelves on the very bottom of the whole thing were hand painted fairy houses.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And they're all kinds, like not even, this was just the one that I was drawn to. There's all sorts. And as if it couldn't have been any more clear, because maybe it wasn't a fairy house, right? The very bottom tag says fairy garden.
Oh my gosh.
I had to laugh. I'm like, well, I guess when you really believe in something and you ask, you shall receive, right? It was just wild.
Well, since you said that story, I have to tell you this one other story, but that also that was part of yesterday. So I was driving for Lyft. Because I like during the pandemic, I just got so homebody, like just my home is my sanctuary. And if I don't have to leave my home, I am happy, and I need to do something to get me out of my comfort zone. And I've got a client from driving with Lyft too. I pass out my business card where appropriate. So I had an interview that I was planning on going on at 4:00 yesterday. And the reason I was in that parking lot was because I was driving somebody else, and I wasn't supposed to be in that parking lot. I was going to turn right before that parking lot, but he's like, hey, can we stop? I need to run and grab some smokes. And I was like, sure, whatever. And so I pulled into the parking lot, and that's when I saw that the owl and the bee. Anyway, so I'm driving at 2:30. I got a ride to go to a place that's 45 minutes away. No, it's an hour away from where I was. And I was like, I won't make it back in time if I go to that ride. So I declined it. And I hate declining rides, just so everybody's aware. The next ride was 45 minutes away. And I'm like, okay, no, decline. I'm not going to make it back in time either. And I was like, oh, maybe that's like the universe telling me not to go on this interview, because I had weird feelings about the interview anyway. And so I was like, okay, if there's a third ride that takes me out of town, then I know I'm not supposed to go on that interview. So no third ride, didn't go out of town. I decided to turn off the app around 3:15. I was like, okay, I haven't eaten all day because I had my root canal and I was waiting for the numb to go away. And so I went to Taco Bell and I got a couple of bean burritos with green sauce because it's the best. And I'm eating this burrito and I'm thinking, if I spill on myself, I'm not going to be able to go to this interview. I ate both burritos, and the very last bite spilled on my shirt. And I was like, all right, message received, not supposed to go on the interview. So I emailed them, not to no call, no show anybody, but I emailed them and I said, it's not going to work today. If you want to reschedule, that's fine. And turned the app back on. I got another ride and I pulled up to this house, and there was a mom with her son and her daughter, and the son was in a wheelchair. And I had earlier, my car does not really fit wheelchairs very well with other people. Like I can have one person in a wheelchair or I can have 3 people. Like I can't really do both usually. I told the mom, I was like, I will do my best. We'll try to figure it out. That wheelchair fit like a glove. I was like, all right, stuck the wheelchair in the back. Her and her daughter and her son get into the back seat, and we're driving, and I'm telling her about my interview story and how the universe decided that I don't need to go on this interview. And and I was telling her about, is it God or is it Google with the mushroom coffee? And we start talking about mushroom coffee. And she's like, well, I think that's a sign. I need to get, I've been thinking about this mushroom coffee. And so we're driving to this hair place called Hairway to Heaven, which I thought just so creative, right? Such a creative name. And we're about 2 minutes away from Hairway to Heaven. And I said, I'm a mom. Well, so I just said, I'm a coach for moms. And she's like, a coach for moms. And I said, well, I help them increase the peace in their life, and especially releasing mom guilt. And she was like, that, if that isn't, you are just like a sign from God, like that, it just, and I said, and that right there is why I wasn't supposed to go on that interview, because I picked her up at 4:03.
It's the universe letting you know that you're doing the work already you're supposed to be doing. The universe is like, why are you going for another job? You got the job.
This is it. This is the job.
You're supposed to be helping moms.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with me. So my final question that I love to ask everybody is, do you feel like we all have a purpose? Like every single one of us? Do you think we all have one?
I do. I think of there's several phrases that pop up, like the God that created the trees and the ocean and the birds and the bees, like that God thought that they needed one of you, that the earth needed one of you also, something along those lines. So I think about that. I think about, there's meaning where you look for it, right? So someone else could have seen that owl and the bee spray painted on the wall and thought, how ugly that somebody spray painted these things on the wall. But that meant something to me because I needed that in that moment. That was like, to me, that was my friend saying, you're going to be okay. I'm here with you. The question is, does everybody have a purpose, right? Okay. So where I kind of think deeper, to me, it's like, of course, everybody has a purpose. Like, there's no question about it. But I go a little bit deeper. It's like, can you miss your purpose? Because I could go on an interview and go do a different job. So if I got that job, would I be missing my purpose? And we have free will. So I can make choices. So it gets all jumbled in my head. Like, well, if I actually have free will, if I have a purpose and I can't miss my purpose, right? Like, so I'll go down fun rabbit holes, but I absolutely believe everybody has a purpose. I think that the purpose for everyone is to learn, like our souls have lessons to learn. And so we're either going to learn it in this lifetime or we're going to learn it in another lifetime. Just how often or how many times do you want to come back to learn that lesson?
I love that answer. I agree with that 100%. I definitely feel like there's an element of waking up that has to happen. There's an element of healing that has to happen, because most people, most of the time, whatever their purpose is, even as natural as it might come to them, there's usually a bunch of unlayering and deconditioning they have to do to even get there. To even know it's possible and know that it's okay. Like for you, you did this coaching several different times, this coaching week several different times, because you were unpeeling the layers to help you know that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Because you didn't know the first time, second time, third time. And it's not saying that everyone has to go be, in a coaching program, but there's all sorts of healing modalities out there that you could do on your own, but you have to be able to be awake enough to know that you have some healing to do. And then once you know that, then you dig it.
The one that works for you, because I went to therapy, talk therapy, and I'll tell you why it worked for me. Because I'm an auditory processor. Like, I'm a verbal processor. Like, if my whole life growing up, I would just follow my mom around the house while she was doing chores, and I would just talk her ear off. And the first time I got really depressed was when I didn't have my mom to talk to anymore. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. I moved in with my dad. My dad was, not a very deep with me conversational person. And I didn't have that kind of relationship with my stepmom. And I'd moved schools, so I didn't have any of my friends. I had no one to talk to. And this is all hindsight. This is all like looking back wisdom. That first therapist was actually a psychiatrist who wanted to put me on antidepressants. And my pediatrician that I'd been with since birth was like, can we try talk therapy real quick? Like before we throw some drugs in her. And I kid you not, the only thing he ever did was tell me to read my stories to him, because I was always a writer. And I was writing stories, and he would tell me to read my stories to him. He never said anything. He just had me read my stories. But I felt better at the end of each session. I just needed to talk. So anyway, finding the modality that works for you could be part of our purpose, part of our job to heal.
I'll definitely say it's not easy. It's simple. The steps are simple. The doing is not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that the check into your own modality, because there's so many different kinds out there. Some people don't do talk therapy well. Coaching is usually in that point a better option, or there's rapid something therapy. I forgot what it's called, but it's like it's a form of hypnosis that does like a quick deep dive and pulls all the stuff up, so you don't have to go and talk about it for years. You could just get it over with. It just depends on who you are, but knowing, and then not just that, but it also evolves. Like for me, I was in talk therapy for almost 5 years with the same therapist. And I'm so grateful that I had him to talk to it was the most chaotic time of my life. But, that's not the modality I need now, and so it does evolve too. So start with what's comfortable now that allows you to start digging a little bit, and know that it might not be that way forever. There might be another thing that you tap into that does more, that feels more like, oh, this is more what I need. But yeah, it's knowing where to start. And if you don't know where to start, journaling is a good place, meditating, just something to ask, just to kind of sit with yourself, I think is probably the first step. Then you kind of listen to that little voice that says, what could I do next? But I love that answer. And, I think that everyone has the potential of connecting with what they're meant to do and what their gifts are. And I think that everyone also has the potential of sleepwalking the rest of their life. So it just depends on where they're at and how open they are to waking up. So if our listeners want to work with you and they need a mom coach, right? First of all, do you work remotely as well as in person?
I do. I mostly work remotely. I'm also in California. But yeah, so you can find me at momsupportcorner.com, and I'm Mom Support Corner on Instagram and TikTok for as long as TikTok's around, and YouTube, and sometimes Facebook.
Perfect. I will be sure to put all those in the show notes, so those that might want to work with you and learn more, they can know where to find you. And this has just been such a wonderful conversation. I mean, mom guilt, being a mom is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, but with supporters like you and just support in general, hearing other moms talking about their mom guilt, that's also a life changer, because you realize you're not by yourself. So, I mean, this has just been such a really beautiful conversation.
And you can get a free chapter of my book by going to my website and putting in your name in the pop-up.
Perfect. Well, be sure to give me that link too, and I'll put that in there. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I love these kinds of conversations.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.